I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am so excited. Starting with Dr. No, 1962, the start of it all. In this film, directed by Terrence Young, starring Sean Connery as the Ian Fleming created character James Bond. Bond and the CIA agent Felix Leiter must go to Jamaica to stop the attempted toppling of a U.S. space rocket. Dr. No serves as the titular villain with whom Bond must thwart. This film has multiple standouts, certainly Connery, Anthony Dawson, Zena Marshall, and Joseph Wiseman. Connery is given the dopest introduction, which immediately puts you on notice that this is the guy. Wiseman, as the title character, gives us just enough to make him quite memorable, what with the hands and the death scene. The movie may have been able to expand his screen time and give him more script, but his slight inclusion does give him an added air of interest in the movie. The action is pretty solid throughout as well, with cool physical set pieces, gunfights, and conflicts, but the ending explosion was what took the cake. Ursula Andress was somewhat a forgettable love interest in the scheme of things despite her stunning looks. I thought there would be a cool reveal during the end, like that Dr. No was her long-lost father, but that never came about. But altogether, this was a very solid beginning and very well done. Dr. No, I give a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And just to give some background as to what I'm trying to accomplish here, I want to give ratings, I want to give reviews like I did with this movie, and then at the end I also want to go over some budget information, some box office information, and rank the movies as well as rank the villains. So, I mean, you're going to want to stay for the whole video, but hey, while you're here and while you're listening, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and comment your favorite Bond moments, your rankings of the films, things you liked. I love to hear it because after watching these 27, I can definitely say I am a James Bond fan. The next film is From Russia with Love, 1963.
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
In this film, Bond is lured to Istanbul to meet a secret admirer and snatch a lector/code decipherer. Though he knows it's a trap, he plans to stay one step ahead. It is, however, just an important piece in a larger game. This film feels like a noticeable step up in more than a few ways. While the villains aren't quite at the level as Dr. No in my mind, a lot of what is improved is the production design, cinematography, and stunts, which serve to give moments much more magnitude. So again, you have Dr. No. He's definitely a more just central force, and here you have multiple train killer, woman general, chess master, all interesting, but it's hard for, you know, 3/4 to add up to $1. But it's all made up for with the cinematography, stunts, and production design. Bond's allies too feel a little bit more memorable, which bring this to an altogether great affair. The film feels though it's building momentum. The main assassin is pretty damn good, and having an ultimate baddie in the shadows is a great touch. Bond's love interest is the most noticeable yet of the two films. The climax felt like a lot bigger, though it was not overdone. It was a thrill ride made to send us off with a spectacle, and that was what this film did. Overall, very solid plot, and it feels like the most elaborate plan Bond has, which kept him on the back foot from the word go. I thought this was great. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And The momentum certainly keeps going. Goldfinger, 1964.
Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
Is next. This time Bond comes face to face with a gold-crazed business tycoon, that being Goldfinger. Goldfinger makes for a well-done villain in his own right, but add Oddjob to the mix, and it's a formidable duo to face the top villains of the franchise thus far. Pussy Galore makes for a very interesting love interest and plays both sides of the fence quite well. The plot is maybe the most ambitious in trying to dirty bomb the gold vault at Fort Knox to 10x the gold holdings of our title character. Overall, everything comes together with this film perfectly and makes for the best film of the first three. Goldfinger stands the test of time if you ask a lot of Blonde fans, and I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it is one of the best Bond films. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. Also, just for those, if you haven't watched some of these films, I'm going to be doing mild spoilers, maybe big spoilers, depending on your perspective. But yeah, I'm going to be going through the entire plot and kind of maybe revealing some things you might not want revealed. Next, we have Thunderball 1965.
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
With 2 nuclear bombs being taken hostage by Spectre, Bond and company must recover them before the British and American government are forced to pay £100 million in ransom. While my expectations were high coming off the best of the series, yet Goldfinger, my dad stated he actually liked Thunderball more. But I found it to be a slight misstep while still not completely disappointing. Yes, the underwater sequences cement this as its own movie, but it also isn't nearly as exciting as the action sequences that would take place on land previously. This certainly suffers from being placed in a tough spot, like a comedian whose opener is better than they are. But the point still remains that this is not better than Goldfinger. The production is impressive for what it was able to do underwater, and I give the team monumental credit for trying something out that was different and really going for it. The villains were distinct, but honestly land near the bottom of the heap compared to what came previously. And also, at the end, I will go through my movie and villain rankings. I also thought Domino was a relatively flat love interest that doesn't compare to Pussy Galore, who is the most interesting thus far, though Fiona Volpe was a pretty damn good femme fatale. Overall, I still found myself enjoying this, but the underwater aspect did halt momentum noticeably, even though they use cold tech. It was logistically impressive, and the shark pull is pretty sick in theory, despite lackluster execution. I almost forgot to mention a very cold beginning with the enemy spy attending his own funeral and the fight with Bond to the death afterwards. Definitely one of the best cold opens so far. Next, we have Casino Royale, 1967.
And that's the thing. All nuns are lesbians.
This is a kind of parody movie that is actually based on Ian Fleming's source material, so it is different than like Austin Powers.
Ow! You shot me, you a-hole!
Because they do use James Bond, 007, and legitimate Bond villains. Don't get me wrong, I love any opportunity to watch Peter Sellers and Orson Welles, but this didn't quite connect with me. In this 007 parody, in which a stacked cast comes together, David Nivens, the Bond in this universe, comes back to lead MI6 against a potential plot from Orson Welles as Le Chiffre. The production design is quite impressive, especially for a parody. In watching Austin Powers, there's proof positive this can be well parodied, but the humor didn't make me laugh in Casino Royale. While I didn't greatly enjoy it, it was still an interesting film to watch. Casino Royale is pretty much everything outside of production design just didn't really connect with me. And despite the stacked cast, this is this is one of my least favorites so far. Now we have You Only Live Twice, 1967.
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
In a return to form, Bond and company must fend off World War III when the US and USSR space shuttle are captured in space, bringing tensions to an all-time high. We finally get the reveal of number one working in Spectre, who is none other than Donald Pleasence, which was just terrific makeup and character design and a great choice in actor. Ernst Stavro Blofeld is the character's name, though we don't get too much background on his motivations. As far as villains go, the continuous build-up that we've had to Blofeld has kind of made him a lot more notorious in my mind and really kind of puts him near the top of the heap because of his huge presence in the plot. This Bond, much like Thunderball, has its own theme, this one being the Japanese Bond, which works better to differentiate without losing much in the process, unlike Thunderball. You Only Live Twice definitely benefits from its placements in the series, coming off the slight misstep in Thunderball and the disappointment in Casino Royale. This film feels like a true return to form. This film has somewhat forgettable love interests. There's two of them. I mean, the first one is very formidable behind the wheel of a car, but outside of that, forgettable. What makes this film feel special again is the practical effects, cinematography, and stunts feeling as good as ever. I give You Only Live Twice a 3.5 out of 5. And that brings us to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969.
As soon as they off, I'm dry!
This is the last Bond film of the 60s. It has the double distinction of being both the George Lazenby and Snow 007. Understandable considering this is the 7th film using James Bond and 6th canonically that they wanted to differentiate. In this film, Bond makes an unlikely alliance with an underworld crime boss to both find love and Blofeld, and the results are lethal. Throughout the end, I got an itching feeling that Tracy, Bond's newfound love, would bite the dust, but the ending wrapped things up in such a way that they hit you when your guard was down. That ending bumped this baby up from a really good film to one that is really telling in who 007 is and building the character moving forward, making this perhaps the most pivotal movie in the series so far. Tracy becomes a top love interest in a competition that is really just neck and neck with Pussy Galore for top dog. I could be swayed either way at the moment, but for all of her impact, I think I give the nod to Tracy for the best love interest. What's really crazy is the first scene I really disliked her, placing a bet with no money, but I came to quickly like her more and more, and the film deserves a lot of credit for that ending. The action in this film was quite impressive. I think this film solidifies that gunfights while racing through the snow is cool, no pun intended. The green screen close-up could have been done without, but the shots of the stunts made it forgivable. This film also seemed to be most focused on espionage, and I liked that slight change. I give On Her Majesty's Secret Service a 4 out of 5, and I think it is great.
The hell is this? A pervert's convention or something? Hey, listen, you can't do this to me. Stop that. I've got friends in
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
Next, we have Diamonds Are Forever, 1971. Diamonds Are Forever falls short of expectations in a few ways. Firstly, the movie is beautifully set up by On Her Majesty's Secret Service to take the 007 journey into some meaningful territory. But it rather drops the whole storyline, which is astounding when you take into consideration the reverence for which On Her Majesty's Secret Service held its previous films, and for Diamonds Are Forever to show nothing of that such. Diamonds Are Forever also seemingly throws everything at the wall with a plot that bounces from diamonds in Africa to lasers in space. Where On Her Majesty's Secret Service was seemingly focused in its plotline and neatly coming up with ways to interweave narratives, Diamonds Are Forever seems rather thrown together. Lastly, the Moon Rover chase outside of the villain facility was laughable. To see fast vehicles falling by the wayside from a moon rover that is clearly not fast is actually the silliest moment so far, maybe outside of Japanese James Bond. The first seemingly gay villainous couple is interesting in this film. To make them so sociopathic and diabolical was a cool touch. Blofeld in this film is not nearly as strong as the previous two. Jill St. John as Tiffany Chase is interesting, but doesn't quite compare to the current top two love interests. Overall, this film was just disappointing. It felt like it dropped the ball and showed that, you know, even the canonical series can kind of come up short. I give Diamonds Are Forever a 2.5 out of 5. And we are on to the 9th Bond film, and this is Live and Let Die, 1973.
Did you touch her?
When I see Kananga.
Right.
So far, Guy Hamilton's direction within the Bond series has been a mixed bag, with arguably the best and very arguably worst films under his name in Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever, respectively. Without trying to sound too brash, this is the Black Bond film of a series that holds a double distinction for also being Roger Moore's first 007 film. And while black culture and African culture is characterized a lot in this film, characterized, I should say, like a caricature, like almost cartoonishly done. This is the furthest this series has gone in an attempt to expose the Bond audience to that culture. The film was interesting and entertaining, but doesn't quite reach the heights of Goldfinger or many other of its contemporaries, though puts the series in a positive direction after Diamonds Are Forever in my mind. Moore does well in his replacement of Connery in this plot, where the leader of a fictional island, San Monique, looks to spread his island's crop of heroin into the United States. While this is still a momentous plot, I appreciate a slight lowering of the stakes as to not make things nearly as far-fetched. Live and Let Die unveils a handful of creative villains, Mr. Kananga / Mr. Big, Teehee, Whisper, and Baron Sonaldi, who they really should have done a lot more with. The Baron's face-off with 007 was entertaining if short-lived, but as a WWF fan, the Papa Shango inspiration was cool as hell to see as a villain in its native habitat. I give Live and Let Die a 3 out of 5. Now we're on to The Man with the Golden Gun, 1974.
This is the part I really like.
So this is my 10th Bond film in a row over the course of days, of course, and it settles into a formula where it truly is hard to top itself. From a story beats perspective, it's hard to be shocked because of what we've seen so far. Though, to be fair, On Her Majesty's Secret Service was able to do so, but the series never took full advantage of. The Man with the Golden Gun, despite having a disappointing theme song compared to the last two, which were greats, is interesting for sure, if for no other reason than having Christopher Lee at the helm as the villain. GoldenEye being an all-around kind of mess-up plot-wise is definitely amusing, but makes the two main love interests rather forgettable. I will go through the women of Bond so far through the top 10, though I think this is the last time I do this, so enjoy. I have Tracy from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, number 1. Pussy Galore from Goldfinger, number 2. Solitary from Live and Let Die. Tatiana from Russia with Love, my bad. Andreas and Goodnight from The Man with the Golden Gun. Domino in Thunderball. Tiffany Case in Diamonds Are Forever. Vesper, Casino Royale. Honey Rider from Dr. No. And then Aki from You Only Live Twice. I don't think I do another female lead. So enjoy that. But up next we have The Spy Who Loved Me and 1977. I have no trouble calling this a great Bond film because it is. All the important elements are humming beautifully in The Spy Who Loved Me as Roger Moore in 007 must fight off Karl Stromberg and one of the most villainous and infamous henchmen yet, Jaws, as they threaten nuclear destruction. It's no secret that Bond films have used the Cold War to its advantage throughout the entirety of the movie series, but this takes a different direction as 007 and Russian agent XXX flirt with love and hate because of their attraction and tumultuous past that puts them at odds. All of the subplots are fleshed out, and the climax is as bombastic. It's a bombastic hour of explosions, gunfire, and fight against the clock for survival in the Egyptian Bond. Also, shout out to one of the most underrated title songs in the series. This film never lets up on the entertainment and excitement and felt like everything worked in tandem to make it one of the best Bond films yet. I thought The Spy Who Loved Me was great, 4 out of 5 stars. And on to Moonraker. And with Moonraker, I had a fever coming in, and the only cure was more Jaws, and I got just that. In the outer space Bond film, Roger Moore once again reprises his role as 007 to quell Hugo Drax's attempt to exterminate the human race and repopulate with a superior race that has collected in an outer space colony, whilst he releases a nerve agent to wipe out the human population on Earth. Jaws is killer in this one, no pun intended, both working against and then with Bond along with CIA agent Dr. Goodhead. And you can never say that the Bond films weren't good at naming their characters. I cannot dislike this one, as the laser fights are not quite Star Wars-esque. The explosions, fights, and involvement of Jaws keeps this as a good film and close to the upper half of the ones I've enjoyed most so far. I give Moonraker a 3 out of 5. We are on to the Greek 007 with For Your Eyes Only. James and the gang must track down a sunken ship that has nuclear launch instructions. In Christato's plans to take the nuclear launcher, he also killed a man who had been tracking the ship. Now, Melina Havelock is going to try to get her revenge. This film is interesting in that it has us tracking the wrong man throughout, Milos Colombo, until about halfway through to find out a man that Bond has been trusting is actually behind it all. Eric Kriegler and Emil Leopold Locke play interesting as the big heavies, putting on cool chase and action-packed sequences. This film does well to try to pull out unique and classic action sequences with ski chases, car chases, deep sea fights, and drowning by towing. I found this to be another entertaining film. Definitely didn't break the mold or kind of surpass its predecessors, but was altogether solid. I give it a 3 out of 5. And this is the first 80s Bond film. Next we have Octopussy.
I wondered when you might arrive.
So you are the mysterious Octopussy.
And you are James Bond. 007 license to kill.
Probably the most memorable by name. Maybe Goldfinger's up there too, but whoa, we're over halfway there. And in the Indian Bond film, James and the gang get mixed up in the jewel smuggling business, which is unbeknownst to them. Octopussy, that is covering up and deploying an attempt at detonating a Russian nuclear weapon in an attempt at national de-armament, is central to this plot. This film throws a shit ton of characters at us under the banner villain, at least originally. Rather than have us chasing the wrong bad guy like the film previous, we are privy to a double cross from villain to villain in quotation marks. While there are tons of characters, this actually serves to make them all marginally memorable, yet the film was exciting from start to finish. I give Octopussy a 3 out of 5. Film 15, Never Say Never Again, 1983.
Have you, Mr. Bond?
Here comes Honey Boo Boo.
Seeks to right the wrongs of Thunderball, a rare misstep in the non-parody Bond films at the beginning of the run. From Dr. No to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thunderball is the one that sticks out for not quite reaching the quality of the others and honestly has very easily identifiable flaws, such as the action losing its speed from underwater sequences. Never Say Never Again seeks to pick up the Bond character we're very familiar with an actor we're familiar with, playing him and drop him into a new cinematic universe and redo Thunderball. I have to say this rendition plays much better as the story takes a larger role in this film and the villains get room to breathe and make their own impact. Quite frankly, this is one of the better Bond films so far. I enjoyed it and thought the meta elements were also quite cool. This has some of the best performances of the series as well and is the right way to send off the legend that is Sean Connery, as this is ultimately his last time portraying 007. 1985 brought us A View to Kill.
This way.
Even from the poster, I thought this looked like a cool Bond film and wasn't disappointed. First of all, we're blessed to have Christopher Walken play a psychopathic villain dead set on flooding Silicon Valley to have a monopoly on computer chips. Mayday plays the lover and heavy for Walken's character Max Zorin. I thought Zorin was played beautifully, making him one of the most evil and scary villains that Roger Moore's Bond has faced yet. Mayday also has such a striking and unique performance that separates herself from the pack of past villains immediately. While I would have liked to get more from Mayday, her turn to the good side and self-sacrifice is certainly enough to give her a big impact on the movie. This film pulls out some of the old proven tricks, that being another ski chase, something new with the horse chase, and some neat background for Zoran's character, being that he was the product of Nazi experiments during World War II. What's nuts is that Dolph Lundgren, who was dating Mayday at the time, was merely a KGB agent in the film and went on to become one of the most popular and well-known Russian figures in Rocky IV of the same year, which would gross twice as much as this film and become a landmark movie culturally. It's so crazy to think what might have been, but I'll say, regardless, I'm glad that Mayday was involved and really happy that Walken got the chance to play a Bond villain and like that combo a lot. Also, I just noticed that this was the last performance as Bond for Roger Moore. What an end of an era. He did look a bit aged here at the end, as did Connery in Diamonds Are Forever, which was not his last film, but they had thought it was in this canonical Bond series, but they will both be missed.
How did it happen?
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
All those feathers and he still can't fly.
Doing here? Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
Had no head for heights.
Such a delicate touch.
Sheer magnetism, darling.
Do something for you, Mr. Bond.
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred.
Up next, we have The Living Daylights.
Because we're just gonna kill him!
Does anybody, and I mean anybody, think that Timothy Dalton looks like Diago from the movie Blow? That is literally all I see whenever I look at him in this movie. It's time for a new 007 to take the throne, and while his reign is short-lived, Timothy Dalton does right by the role. What's funny is that I've seen more from John Glenn in this Bond series than I haven't, and yet this feels distinct aside from a new frontman. And the same sentiment goes for the writing team, yet the pacing feels slightly tweaked so that you get that breather before diving right back into another wild action scene. It's ever so slight, yet made for a noticeable difference in my experience. Anywho, to avoid having a stroke trying to explain this myself, British agent James Bond Timothy Dalton helps KGB officer Georgy Koskov defect during a symphony performance. During his debriefing, Koskov reveals that a policy of assassinating defectors has been instated by new KGB head Leonid Pushkin, but as Bond explores his threats, a counterplot surfaces involving a shady American arms dealer, Joe Don Baker, and a pair of Russian assassins, Nekroz and Kara Milovy. I let Wikipedia write that because it feels a lot more complex after the fact. I was able to follow it. Honestly, the plot and pacing were the best aspects of this film, and I can see why it is rated so warmly. The villains were actually relatively forgettable, but the action sequences were some of the coolest up to this point, including the battle at the military airport and the fight on the plane itself. up to the bombing of the bridge, which was pure non-stop action. I gave The Living Daylights a 3 out of 5. Timothy Dalton reprises his role of James Bond one last time in License to Kill.
You're dead.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
'Cause we're just gonna kill him!
This is an extremely solid entry with a harder edge than normal. What has made Dalton's run so distinct, on top of having a slightly more violent edge, is the creativity used for the stunts and story just that much, making the story just that much sharper. The tanker flight was super distinct, and there are a lot of memorable set pieces, which is hard to do when the series has already done so much. In this film, Bond goes rogue to exact revenge on a drug dealer who attempted to kill CIA agent that we actually were introduced in the very first Bond film, Felix Leiter, and successfully killed Leiter's new bride on their wedding night. The villains have some name value in the way of Robert Davi and Benicio del Toro as Davi's henchmen. Kari Haruki Tagawa is also in the mix as Hong Kong DEA undercover agent. And for those of you not immediately familiar with the name, he is most famous in my mind for playing Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat 1995.
Your soul is mine.
I wish there had been more going on with Tagawa's character, if I'm being honest. Overall, it was a good plot that had Bond pulling string to pit baddies against one another until the climax with help of Pam Bouvier, CIA, and Q, who plays a larger role than normal. I think this is easily in the top 10 of Bond films so far. And I give it a 3 out of 5. We're into the 90s and on to Pierce Brosnan with GoldenEye.
Alec?
I'm struggling to rate this one honestly because this is a bit of a mixed bag. But before I get ahead of myself, Pierce Brosnan takes up the 007 mantle against Sean Bean as Alec Trevelyan, a former MI6 agent, Cossack, teaming up with Russian agents Xenia Onatop, Boris Grishenko, and General Ourumov to exact revenge on Britain for its historical role against the Cossacks and by proxy his family's lineage. Trevelyan comes back from the dead, at least from Bond's perspective, to exact this revenge in a story where Bond was initially in a plot to avenge this fallen friend and agent. While I could feel this reveal coming, I still enjoyed it, and if my memory isn't shot, is really the first time this has been effectively done in the Bond series. Yes, Blofeld has seemingly died and come back a time or two, but this never really had a huge payoff like this film did. For many of the goods with this film, there's an aspect that offsets it. The action was intense and awesome, however, the CGI at times throws it off. There is some great back and forth between Bond and Trevelyan and Bond and M, but Simonova, her character's delivery honestly ruined a lot of dialogue scenes that she was in. I think what solidifies this, like the Dalton Bond films, is that this film gets inventive with the stunts and also maybe has the best sense of humor of the series. Altogether, I enjoyed this. It was neat to see this evolution within the series. Also, Pierce was the one Bond I was reticent of, and I didn't think I would like him at all, but he quickly won me over, and I think he fits the role quite well. On to the second playing of Bond for Pierce Brosnan. It's another solid entry in his era, though I'd have to lean towards his introduction film as better. The plot is interesting enough, with Bond uncovering the plans of a media mogul training to instigate World War III, but putting Britain and China against one another through disinformation, hacking, and covert attacks. The plot does feel a lot more modern, and while large in scale, well thought through. The villain is interesting, and his cronies are too, but not quite at the level of some, or I guess even just the movie previous. Michelle Yeoh was welcome and an awesome inclusion in a film that had an all-round solid cast. By no means is this the best 007 film, but also not the worst either. And this is, of course, Tomorrow Never Dies, which I'm not sure if I said the title, but that was all in regards to Tomorrow Never Dies, 1997. And next we have The World Is Not Enough, 1999.
Stop! You didn't finish! Stop!
In the last of the 90s, another solid entry in the Brosnan saga as 007. I like this story a lot with this one. The motivation was there for villains, and there was enough reveals that were well thought out to keep you following the story without rolling your eyes. Also, the lore behind the baddie who was shot in the head without dying was a bit far-fetched, but neat nonetheless. Cool action sequences again, which really goes without saying. Altogether, nothing spectacular for the series, but a step up, in my humble opinion, from the film immediately preceding this one. Ultimately, well done, fleshed out villains, and which makes this better than the others below it in my rankings as well. Yeah, I liked that the female turned on Bond. That was interesting, and the guy who played the main villain was really good. So I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. All good things must come to an end, and unfortunately for Pierce Brosnan, Die Another Day was not a good film, and his run of good films came to a bad end. Die Another Day jumps the shark both visually and narratively. Invisible cars, ice hotels, and warm water resurrections may sound like something that could be done in a 007 movie if done well, but here they are not. This film is the second where a villain is presumed dead and comes back to be the big bad in Brosnan's reign, which is just too short a time period to pull that back out. Bond is also betrayed by another agent in a predictable yet nonsensical way. There was no significance to this character in Bond's journey up to the first betrayal, but then goes on to build his trust shortly in the story just to break it again chronologically as the story is told, or unfolds rather. It's just lazy writing that doesn't adequately build up the relationship for the movie's sake in a meaningful way. Lastly, practical effects have long been a hallmark of what makes 007s so damn good. And special, quite honestly. And the use of CGI not only looks terrible, but allows them to further jump the shark by having stupid and ludicrous scenes such as Bond surfing in an Arctic tsunami. This is the worst swan song for Pierce out of every other Bond, and that stinks. Or the henchmen did have a cool aesthetic, and could have been one of the more memorable villains of the series, but the film detracts from all the good with blinding badness. Also, the humor that I noted as being good at the beginning of this series, it just takes it too far. Everything has to be a punchline. Most dialogue is just a one-liner, and it does get kind of tiresome with this film. I feel bad because Brosnan, I guess, was super excited, and I think you can tell that in his performances because he is like the shining good part of his reign, and he just got saddled with really bad scripts, and he ultimately made the most of it, but I just think it sucks that he had to go out this way, honestly. But I will say it sucks for Brosnan, but for that to go so poorly, I think is why we got what we ultimately get. And this comes in the way of Casino Royale.
I've been in the danger zone.
2006, no bullshit. This is the best Bond film so far. It's rough, it's rugged, it's gritty, and it's such a departure from where Die Another Day left off. Daniel Craig is a different beast from the 007's previous, and I have to say it works. Craig looks like a goddamn killing machine in this movie, and the whole film does well to really flesh him out from his inception as a 00 agent. All the creative decisions just work so well, and the final act is just the cherry on top. Mads Mikkelsen is dynamite as Le Chiffre. I love him as an actor, and he was the right choice. The opening is tight, and the black and white is also the right choice. Die Another Day tried these weird stylistic choices that didn't work, but Casino Royale does this with great payoff. And when I don't weird, I mean different for Casino Royale. From the black and white beginning, which I mentioned, to the effect used when Bond is poisoned. The whole ending gives On Her Majesty's Secret Service vibes, and to play with those expectations, only to have his love betray him for a higher villain is fucking golden. This is the pinnacle of Bond so far. To follow up Casino Royale, we have Quantum of Solace.
I've been in the danger zone.
2008. Such a bummer this film was because it picks up where the masterful Casino Royale left. Oh, by the way, sorry. Casino Royale, 4.5 out of 5. Back to Quantum of Solace. This was a bummer coming off the toes of Casino Royale. Definitely a misstep. The more grounded direction of this series is nice, and the resolution to Bond's relationships from Casino Royale is done really well and has legitimate character development in it, but overall has a relatively forgettable villain and frenetic editing that make this movie good where it could have been great. And the editing, I saw a video on Bohemian Rhapsody when that movie came out, and from YMS, who I really like, and kind of pointed out something that I was oblivious to at that point. This movie, I don't think it just came through because I was aware of what YMS said about Bohemian Rhapsody. I think it would have been noticeable to really anyone. So if you've seen this film and you've noticed this, let me know. But in Bohemian Rhapsody, it just switches camera angles without purpose. Quantum of Solace does something similarly, but not during dialogue scenes, which would maybe be distracting, during action sequences, which make it just disorienting, and you don't know what's going on. And the action sequences of Daniel Craig's era, speaking for the film's after this and Casino Royale are good, and we want to see them. And I don't know if it was to maybe cover up stunts that didn't go well, to, you know, if I don't know, but I would have rather seen execution at a 10 and, you know, difficulty at a 5 than vice versa. And maybe that's what happened and they had to edit around it. I don't know, but it did really detract from this film. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It's definitely not one of the worst of the series, but I mean, there was so much momentum coming off the heels of Casino Royale, and I think this movie would have been drastically better if just the editing was improved. 2012 brings us Skyfall.
I won't miss next time, Mr. Silver.
Not bad. I've been in the danger zone.
Hot diggity dog, did I like this movie a lot. I think Casino Royale works better as a film, and the collective villains work more in Casino Royale, but the superb narrative-driven plot of Skyfall and Javier Bardem as the villain works so fucking well. The scene where Bardem shows the effects of cyanide stuck with me and is maybe one of the most memorable scenes of the entire Bond series is brilliant. And the final standoff is great, and so is this film. I give Skyfall a 4 out of 5, and on to the next film, which is Spectre.
Cuckoo. I've been in the danger zone.
2015. Picking right up from the great Skyfall, where Bond loses M and the actual structure of Bond as we know it is formed. Spectre continues us on this journey, further building the lore of James Bond and his most infamous villain in the series and story, Blofeld, is revealed. First, I'd like to say that the homage to the original Bond films is great. It shows true fandom and care for this series. The series being episodic thus far is a risk, right? Because inevitably there will be a fall off of viewers who aren't keeping up with the previous entries. The Connery series did not really have this type of episodic nature. Yes, there might have been occasional references to an event from a film in the past, but never anything like this latest series, I'll call it, the Daniel Craig era. And I think what they're doing now allows for deeper storylines. Blofeld's ties to Bond are revealed as Blofeld's father mentored a young 007 before Blofeld would kill his father and Bond's mentor. Blofeld also reveals his fingerprints being on the murder of Bond's loved ones. I thought this story was well done and the villain is as classic as ever. Great movie all around and solidifies Daniel Craig as the best Bond. Also, let's give it up for Dave fucking Bautista in this. Another tremendous henchman. Now we are on to No Time to Die 2021.
I've been in the danger zone.
And that means the last Bond film as of now. The man that has sex with women like there's no tomorrow, but never bears children, that we know of. And the man that gets shot at and exploded, but never dies. Guys, spoilers. The man that gets shot at and exploded, but never dies, does both in one film. The ending hit me hard. This series has had some serious heavy hitters as villains. especially during the Daniel Craig era, which is quite honestly a renaissance period for 007 after Brosnan comparatively lackluster period as the man they call Bond. Rami Malek was always going to be a big deal for the series, as outside of David Niven in a parody Bond film, he is the only actor to have won Best Actor at the Oscars and star in the series. Malek was given a deep and dark character with a lot of meat on the bone, and his actions will be as memorable as any other characters in the entire series, as he ultimately he ultimately was the only one to take James Bond down. The amount of depth that this movie gives to characters we already know and love, James Bond first and foremost, is unparalleled, as it shows him as a protector to not only the woman he loves, which we've seen many times, but also as a father. Craig has portrayed a Bond unlike any other of his predecessors, but this film solidifies that this is a masterpiece to behold, and that Daniel Craig is the best James Bond. With villains first, we have Le Chiffre in Adolf Hitler, Casino Royale. Next, we have Lucifer, Safin, No Time to Die. Third, Goldfinger, Odd Job. Fourth, Silva from Skyfall, Javier Bardem. Fifth, Blofeld, C, Mr. Hinks in Spectre. 6, Stromberg, Jaws in The Spy Who Loved Me. 7, Maximilian Largo, Fatima Bush in Never Say Never Again. 8, Blofeld, played by Telly in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. 9, Blofeld, played by Donald Pleasance in You Only Live Twice. 10, Dr. No. 11, Mayday. 11, Alec Trevelyan, Xenia, Onatop, Boris, and General Oromov in GoldenEye. 14, Largo, Thunderball. 15, Hugo Drax in Jaws and Moonraker, which I do love Jaws. I mean, that's why he's up as high as 6. Hugo Drax was good, whatever. But, you know, Jaws was also not a villain the entire time. 16, Red Grant, From Russia with Love. 17, now we're starting to get to kind of the lower tier villains. Elliot Carver, Henry Gupta, and Stamper. 18, Dominic Green, Quantum of Solace. 19, Francisco Scaramanga in The Man with the Golden Gun. Fun fact that I actually learned from someone on Letterboxd is that Ian Fleming apparently, and I haven't searched this or to fact check it, served in the military with Christopher Lee, which plays Francisco Scaramanga. They served in World War II together, and Ian Fleming based the character of James Bond on Christopher Lee, and they eventually were able to have him play a villain in the Bond series, which I just think is super cool. And Christopher Lee is such a great character in obviously Lord of the Rings, he's huge, but he was really good as Scaramanga. It's just, I think had he done it maybe in the 2000s, I think Igor Locke. 22, Gustav Graves, Zhao in Die Another Day. 23, Franz Sanchez, Dario Milton in License to Kill. 24, Khan, Gobinda, Orlov, Twin 1, Twin 2 in The Yo-Yo Killer in Octopussy. 25, Mr. Kanongo, Mr. Big in Live and Let Die. 26, General Koskov, Necros, Brad Whitaker. And 27, Le Chiffre and Jimmy Bond in Casino Royale, which leaves the movie rankings left. Before we go through those, drop a like on this video. Let me know your villain rankings, your movie rankings. thought on the series, your favorite James Bond, all of those in the comments down below. And for sure, subscribe, because I want to be coming out with a lot of shit like this in the future. And I really appreciate the support. So without further ado, we have Casino Royale, number 1. No Time to Die, 2. 3, Goldfinger. 4, Skyfall. 5, Spectre. 6, The Spy Who Loved Me. 7, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. 8, From Russia with Love. 9, You Only Live Twice. 10, Never Say Never Again. 11, Dr. No. 12, Moonraker. 13, Quantum of Solace, as we're coming up on the halfway point. 14, GoldenEye. 15, License to Kill. 16, The World Is Not Enough. 17, A View to a Kill. 18, The Man with the Golden Gun. 19, Tomorrow Never Dies. 20, The Living Daylights. 21, For Your Eyes Only. 22, Octopussy. 23, Live and Let Die. 24, Thunderball. 25, Die Another Day. 26, Diamonds Are Forever. And last but not least, but is least, 27, Casino Royale again, the 60s film. It is altogether fitting and proper that Casino Royale is both the best film of the series and the worst. Now, I want to go on to something kind of cool that I think you're all going to really enjoy. But just going through the films, I want you to look at the budgets and box offices for this. And I adjusted them all for inflation as well as the salary for the lead actors. Now, there's probably some benefits and percentages that aren't being covered in the base salary, so forgive me for that, but I just wanted to kind of look at like how well these freaking films did. And if you adjust for inflation, this made profit almost 600 million, which is just fucking crazy to think about. And the headline of Connery earned 16,000 for Dr. No sounds pretty crazy. Look, they didn't realize the film was going to make nearly as much as it did, but he made over 100,000 today's dollars for trying this new series. It still sounds nuts, but just putting it a little bit into perspective. And this would be amended because Bond would go on to make 154,000 From Russia with Love, which if you adjust for inflation is about 1.5 million. And his total earnings to this point get closer to 2 million total at $1,711,414.11. The budget for this is 5 million with, or 50 million with inflation, but the box office is almost at 800 million. Meaning it almost made 800 million, 7.5 almost. And the series is over $1 billion net income up to From Russia with Love. The budget would increase, and with inflation, and I think I fucked that up, but you know, don't mind me, because I did mess this up. But anywho, the box office would be, it would be a $1 billion gross, which is like a huge kind of, we look at that as holy shit, like this film is tremendous, like it made over $1 billion. But if you're doing adjust for inflation, Goldfinger was $1 billion film. Connery gets paid close to $5 million for this film adjusted for inflation, bringing his current earnings lifetime as Bond close to 7 million total. Then we have Thunderball, which is a relatively disappointing Bond film, and that would make over $1 billion adjusted for inflation too. Unsurprising because of how good Goldfinger was. A bunch of people went out and saw this in film. It actually makes more adjusted for inflation than Goldfinger did, but I think so many people had heard about how good it was that they went to see it. Bond makes nearly 14 million up to this point, lifetime, and the budget adjusted for inflation is near $100 million. But that's like, it's nuts, the fact that, I mean, look at the films now that have $100 million budgets, and not a lot of them are coming back over $1 billion. We have Casino Royale, which is basically proof that any Bond film can make money because, with the budget and adjusting for inflation, obviously Goldfinger, I fucked up. That's on me. But I am taking the budget times 2.5 to kind of try to put the marketing cost into there and then adjusting that all for inflation. This was a huge budget film in today's standards, like almost $300 million total spent, but it made a pretty penny with $384 million at the box office in a film that is probably the consensus worst Bond film. David Niven, they don't know exactly how much he made, but the salary is typically 9% of the entire movie budget, which they're assuming Niven made around $1 million, and if you adjust that for inflation, is $9 million, which instantly puts him near Sean Connery's lifetime total, which is kind of funny that in this lackluster film, David Niven, albeit, best Oscar winner, almost immediately has more money, career playing Bond than Connery up to this point. Then You Only Live Twice, another billion-dollar movie with what would be considered a $200 million budget in today's day and age. Now, finally, Connery makes close to what Niven made from his one movie, around $1 million, but it is it's both, he made the same amount, and puts the series net income over $4 billion and almost made $1 billion. It's just insane. I mean, this is, historically, if you look at it, it's like a money-making machine a la Marvel in its heyday. Up to, from Iron Man 1 up to Avengers Endgame is kind of like what we're looking at here with James Bond. It just is printing money. Connery puts his current Bond earnings up over $23 million. George Lazenby enters the fray, and it shows again, even with a change of character, it's not making as close to $1 billion, but it's making over $500,000 in net income. Lazenby is disrespectfully paid as far as I'm concerned. Yes, he was a male model, but I thought he did really, really well with the role. At the time, it was $80,500, and if you adjust that for inflation, it's not even super close to $1 million. It's $674,864.18. Pretty nuts. Then we have Diamonds Are Forever, a movie that, I didn't think was very good, but again, it almost makes near $1 billion. Relatively low budget. Under $100 million adjusted for inflation. So this made over $800 million net income. And Connery gets another pay bump, nearly making $10 million off of this one film, bringing his current earnings to $32 million, almost $33 million. We have Roger Moore's first film. This is another billion-dollar film, and there was probably a lot of excitement around seeing Roger Moore and what he would do with the series. So adjusted for inflation, this grosses $1 billion and damn near nets $1 billion. It grosses $1 billion and damn near nets $1 billion as well, with just slightly over $100 million budget adjusted for inflation. It's insane. Moore, he got $1 million at the time, which would, adjusted for inflation, be about $7 million. So Connery is number one on the leaderboards with almost $33 million. Niven with 9, Moore with nearly 7, and then Lazenby, he's perpetually going to be last with just less than $1 million career earnings as Bond. Then we have The Man with the Golden Gun. This is a fall off from the huge numbers that Live and Let Die had. You know, that one grossed $1 billion. This one has a healthy gross in $600 million. And the budget, it's less than $50 million, which is crazy. So this nets over $500,000, and the series up to this point has made $7 billion adjusted for inflation. Roger Moore makes $1 million with this film, which is adjusted for inflation $6 million, which makes Moore now the second highest earner under Connery for all Bond's career. The Spy Who Loved Me, one of my favorite of Moore's run, did really well at the box office. It comes close to $1 billion gross, a bigger budget as well. This is nearly $200 million, but over $100 million adjusted for inflation. This still nets a really healthy sum of $769 million, and the series comes close to $8 billion with this film. Moore bumps up his lifetime earnings as Bond all the way up to $18 million, and he's over the halfway mark of what Connery has made so far and doubled nearly what David Niven has made as James Bond. Next we have Moonraker, which again comes close to $1 billion in adjusted for inflation at the box office with $891 million in a big budget production that spent $360, I'm assuming, adjusted for inflation. Again, this makes $500 million at the box office and puts the series over $8 billion lifetime. Roger Moore, he now has made more than Sean Connery lifetime as Bond with $35 million playing 007. We have For Your Eyes Only, just, a slight dip from Moonraker as far as what it did at the box office. A big budget again. This made nearly $700 million, and the budget was pretty damn big, $236 million. It gets close to $500 million net income total, and we got a pretty penny paid to Roger Moore, and his lifetime earnings are now adjusted for inflation over $50 million. Octopussy, we have making the series now net income over $500 million again, and the series is now $9 billion richer. Moore gets paid a pretty penny again, taking his lifetime earnings up to $66 million. We have Sean Connery coming back, not getting paid quite as much as Roger Moore was recently, but it helps bump Connery's lifetime earnings over $40 million. This film did relatively decent at the box office, but had a big budget, so only nets $200 million, which I'm saying only. I mean, films are lucky to make money nowadays, let alone this kind of money. But for the success this series has had, I mean, it probably feels a little not as good. A View to Kill kind of follows suit as Never Say Never Again, only netting $200 million net income. Moore makes a good amount of money on this. $21 million for this one film alone, adjusted for inflation, He's getting close to 100 million total, and this series is getting close to 10 billion. But ultimately, he's not going to get there because this is his last film. So, Moore's earnings, he's the top earner at 88 million so far. Dalton is next up. He gets paid a decent amount, closer to what David Niven's actually got paid for his first appearance. This film does relatively well, again, out of the box, because it had been trending where even the gross was not great, and the net income is more closely associated to that. It's a big budget film, over near 300 million spent on it, which is like, that would be a tremendous budget for any film nowadays. But the series has proven it makes money. Like the bad films have made money, and the good films have made a lot of money. So it makes sense to invest this much in it, because you're probably gonna maybe even be able to double the money that you put in. Dalton, again, he gets a slight pay bump in what would be 12 million now, and it brings Dalton up to the third all-time earner under the Bond series. We see a little bit of a drop-off from the gross, only kind of scraping close to 400 million, whereas the first one made 500 million. And that might have been why Dalton was replaced. I'm not quite sure. I think it was legal disputes from what I heard, and there was a script for Timothy Dalton, but look into that at your own accord. Then we go into Pierce Brosnan, 400 at the time, which is about double that in today's dollars. Again, getting close to David Niven's, but not quite. This made a lot at the box office. I think people were itching for a new Bond movie, and is the first one to make over, I think, even 500 since Octopussy, and then over 7 since Moonraker. So, puts into perspective, people were really ready. Big budget, again, over $300 million spent, and over $400 million net income. This film, well, it was License to Kill that brought it over 10 billion, but this really helped it get closer to 11 billion total for the series. And the momentum keeps going with the Pierce Brosnan era as Tomorrow Never Dies. Again, grosses a lot, but this film spent a shit ton of money and risked a lot on this film. This is $500 million budget in today's dollars. So this only nets $100 million, which is still, that's a tidy sum. Like, don't get me wrong, but you were netting close to that without the huge risk from License to Kill. Anywho, Brosnan goes up to second all-time earner with this film, where he made $15 million in today's dollars on Tomorrow Never Dies. The World Is Not Enough kind of follows suit of the film immediately previous to this, where its huge budget has it risking and flirting with not making any money. Big box office, it makes nearly 700 million, but it spends over 600 million, so it only nets 44,876,000. Brosnan at the time got paid $12.4 million, which comes out to about 22, close to 23 million, putting Brosnan now as the second all-time earner, already out-earning Sean Connery as James Bond, which is pretty crazy. And like, if you look what he did for the series, it's like nowhere close. Then you have Die Another Day, which is ultimately Pierce Brosnan's last Bond appearance. Again, he's grossing insane numbers, but they are spending so much on the budget. Ultimately, yeah, the net income's a really healthy number, but he's definitely not netting nearly as much as Connery or even Roger Moore. Brosnan got paid a lot for this and puts him close to what Roger Moore made, but ultimately Roger Moore is still the number one earner of the series. Now we have Daniel Craig. This movie, we're finally getting close to the Bond series breaking $1 billion in today's dollars at the box office. Huge budget. It's over $500 million, but this nets a really tidy sum, close to $400 million, and the series is over $11 billion finally. And I felt like I said just minutes ago, like, oh, it gets it closer to $11 billion, but this is the film that finally took it. Daniel Craig gets paid a disrespectful amount. If I'm not mistaken, I think everyone except for Connery and Lazenby got paid more than Daniel Craig on their debut film, adjusted for inflation, of course. Quantum of Solace, again, we're getting close to $1 billion at the box office, but this budget is insane. I cannot believe they spent this much as we're going into basically the housing bubble and recession, and they couldn't have known that, right? But just bad timing. And the net income is one of the least yet at only $20 million. Daniel Craig gets paid a more respectful amount, $10 million today's dollars. And finally, Lifetime earns more than David Niven. Skyfall was just insanely successful if you're to adjust for inflation, making $1.486 billion at the box office. Also spending a lot less, only $0.67 billion, and netting $816 million. This is nuts. And Daniel Craig takes home $26.8 million, puts him above Dalton lifetime earnings and right on the tail of Sean Connery as James Bond. The next film was another successful one. In today's day and age, it would have grossed over $1 billion. Huge budget though, almost spends $1 billion to make $1 billion, and net income only $169 million. Daniel Craig out earns Pierce Brosnan now and Sean Connery, and is right on Roger Moore's heels for lifetime earnings. And then the last film to date doesn't quite make $1 billion and nearly spends just as much as it made. $24 million net income. And again, these are all kind of, it's fuzzy math. I don't know exactly how much, but if we're just to use the formula, which is generally pretty accurate, 2.5, the budget that you'll find online to include marketing expenses. And Daniel Craig is now, as it stands, the lifetime highest earner as Bond as far as salaries go. Y'all, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all got something out of it. I really appreciate you joining me here for this. And be sure to subscribe and check out my newest videos as well as my library. And I will catch you on the flippity floop. Bye, y'all.